Meanwhile, the midterm elections are getting closer and closer for Democrats. 538 estimates that there's about a 2 in 3 chance that Democrats are going to hold the Senate, and there's a 70% chance that Republicans are going to take the House at this point. And Democrats are struggling because a lot of their candidates are deeply flawed. So in Pennsylvania, for example, John Fetterman, the Senate candidate in Pennsylvania, who is a lifelong career useless person, happened to have a debilitating stroke on the campaign trail when completely absent for months. And now that he's back, he's slurring words in interviews. And this is a rather major issue. Like, if you're going to elect a senator who has a severe health problem that could impede his ability to do the job, why would that not be a major issue? I'm confused as to why that would not be something that we take stock of. I mean, I'm old enough to remember 2008 when John McCain, just having a tough time typing because he'd been tortured in Vietnam, was used as campaign fodder by his political opponents. And John McCain was still very much with it upstairs and ended up, of course, living for another 10 years after that. And so, maybe he'll die in office or all the rest. But then when it came to Joe Biden was slurring his words and walking into walls and talking to ghosts. And we're supposed to pretend that he has no conditions at all, or that it's some sort of evil to point out that he's got some problems over here. Same thing is now happening with John Fetterman. So there's an NBC News reporter named Dasha Burns, and she interviewed John Fetterman. And she pointed out that he had a difficult time engaging in small talk, that he had insisted on using some sort of closed captioning device because his auditory processing has been affected by his stroke. She in this interview, pressed Fetterman for a medical update, which he has not given. He hasn't given like a doctor's note giving his medical progress. Here's what that sounded like.
We've asked for your medical records. We've asked to have a conversation with someone from your medical team, to interview your physician. You've declined those requests. Why?
Well, I feel like we have been very transparent in a lot of different ways. When our doctor has already given a letter saying that I'm able to serve and to be running.
I mean, respectfully, that letter from your physician, that was 6 months ago. Don't voters deserve to know your status now?
Being in front of thousands and thousands of people and having interviews and getting around all across Pennsylvania, that gives everybody and the voters decide, if they think that it's really the issue.
Well, no, at a certain point, you should probably give a medical update, considering you had a debilitating stroke that took you off the campaign trail for a significant period of time. And you require, as a condition of interviews, a closed captioning device that allows you to read what people are saying to you. So the very next thing that happens here is what you would predict. So first, people say John Fetterman is fine. He's fine, right? The first narrative from the media, and it was every blue check you could imagine. How dare you suggest that there's something wrong with John Fetterman? You say that he can't engage in small talk. Well, I say that there are people in Silicon Valley who are bad at small talk and they own billion-dollar businesses. Well, that's not what we're talking about, Kara Swisher. Kara Swisher literally tweeted that. She was like, there are a lot of socially awkward people in Silicon Valley. Oh, do they have debilitating strokes that make it difficult for them to process auditory information? Is that what happened to them? So they started with, he really doesn't have a problem. And if you notice his problem, it's a problem. Okay. And then they moved on to, you are terrible for noticing that he has a problem, because it's ableism now. Well, first of all, it's not ableism to question whether the guy is medically sound to do the job. Is it ableism for a fire department to question whether a person with a significant back problem is capable of carrying another human being on their back out of a fire? Is that ableism? Is it ableism when the fire department is like, this guy in a wheelchair, he might have a real difficult time going into burning houses and dragging people out? Is that ableism, or is that just the description of the job? But according to the left, it's now ableism. This prompted Dasha Burns to have to tweet out, quote, "We were happy to accommodate closed captioning. Our reporting did not and should not comment on his fitness for office. That's for voters to decide. What we do push for as reporters is transparency. That's our job. Fetterman sat down and answered our questions. That's his job." But again, the idea here is that she's an ableist for even noticing that there is something wrong with John Fetterman. And there is something wrong with John Fetterman. Again, whether he's qualified for office or not is up to the voters of Pennsylvania. They will decide that question. But whether he is medically fully capable is something that he should speak to. And a reporter reporting on it, it just shows you the insane tilt of the media, that this is now considered verboten. So you can ask whether Donald Trump is legitimately an insane person, a mentally ill person, which was the talk of the day throughout 2016 and then again throughout 2020. That's totally fine. But it is not okay to ask whether John Fetterman actually is medically sound at this point. Again, a lot of this from the media is a desperation attempt to shore up Democratic hopes in the Senate. In Pennsylvania, by the way, another apparent Democratic attempt to shore up the problem. This is pretty amazing. Apparently, a top election official in Pennsylvania says that the state is going to disregard the Supreme Court's guidance on counting mail-in ballots arriving in envelopes with typos or incorrect dates. saying the state's Commonwealth Court has already established the practice as licit. The acting Secretary of State, a person named Leigh Chapman, announced Pennsylvania election officials should continue counting ballots that arrive with improperly filled out envelopes in accordance with the Commonwealth Court's previous ruling on the matter. Chapman wrote, quote, every county is expected to include undated ballots in their official returns for the November 8th election, consistent with the Department of State's guidance. So there were so many mail-in ballots during the last election cycle that the question was, you find an undated ballot, it's the day after the election, you're counting all the ballots. It's unclear whether it was sent post-election or whether it was sent pre-election. And apparently, this election official now just wants to count all of it. Which you want to shore up people's faith in the electoral system. This would not be the way to do this. A May 2022 decision in the Third U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled ballots in this type of undated envelopes must be counted regardless. The Supreme Court ruled Tuesday the prior decision is moot, returning to the established election laws. But Chapman says the Supreme Court ruling does not affect the state's current election protocol, which will continue accepting and counting the ballots in defective envelopes. She cited a separate Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania ruling that said such ballots must be accepted. Again, this is pretty wild stuff. You want to shore up faith in the electoral system. That's not the way to do it. But it seems like for some of these election officials, this is true on both sides. It's not about shoring up faith. It's really about just who wins and who loses. Meanwhile, in Ohio, demonstrating the difficulties that the Biden White House is having, Tim Ryan, who is running a very hot race with J.D. Vance in Ohio, he was asked specifically if Biden should campaign with him. He's like, no, under no circumstances.
Do you want President Biden to come to Ohio and publicly campaign with you in this final lap?
No, I won't be asking the president to come in, or very, very few, if any, national people, to come in and actually campaign with us, because I want to be the main face, the main messenger of this campaign.
Keep that man as far away from me as humanly possible, apparently, is the mode here. Really, really strong stuff happening. Alrighty, we've reached the end of today's show. However, we still have to talk about the midterm elections and the attempt by Democrats to turn this into a referendum on our democracy itself, plus the latest in the Ukraine war. If you're not a member, you need to join over at dailywireplus.com. Click the link in the description and join us right now.